Can you talk a little about the relationship between autonomy and grit? One of the things, if you go back, Martin Seligman may have written about this. Csikszentmihalyi wrote about it extensively. Autonomy and attention seem to be coupled systems, right? So you almost can't give something your undivided attention over a long period of time. You can do it, of course, for a short period of time, even forced into it or whatever course. What have you seen about autonomy and grit over in your research?
So autonomy can mean lots of things. Can you just say a little bit more about how you're using the term autonomy? Like what is not autonomy? That would also help me.
So I'm probably using autonomy in the same way kind of it shows up maybe in self-determination theory as in right. So you're doing what you were doing by choice. You're not being coerced into it or seduced into it, to use their language. That's sort of how I'm poking at it.
Yeah. Okay. So probably the data that is most relevant to that excellent question is the data I already spoke about a little bit with this Ken Sheldon goal scale, where autonomous, I think he calls them self-concordant goals, right? So they're chosen, like, this is what I want to do. I don't feel forced to do it. I don't have to do it, but I want to do it. That ended up being, characteristic of really gritty people. So I think that's probably the most relevant. I can add to that, though. I've interviewed a lot of what I would consider paragons of grit, right? People who really exemplify passion and perseverance and high achievement. And I have myself not yet interviewed somebody who really said, I was just forced into this. I say that with a little hesitation because I think Andre Agassi has said that he was totally forced into tennis and hated it like every second, and yet became world class. So I wonder if you guys have thought about that, because that does seem to be a counterexample to my intuitions anyway. But I didn't interview anyone like that. Have you guys thought of the Andre Agassi counterexample?
It's interesting. I think his example only works if you become a speed freak along the way. I think that's how it helps. I'm joking. I mean, it did happen to him, but I'm joking.
No offense, Andre.
No offense, Andre. So sorry.
I don't know him, and I haven't studied him as a case study. And I think he may have said that, he did realize at some point that tennis was a thing that he could become world class in, and he really wanted to be world class in something. But as I said, I don't know. I do think that has to be rare, at least, right? That I mean, personally, I can't force myself to do much of anything for very long at all. I mean, really, the things that I do that are hard, that take a lot of effort, are things that I want to do. I mean, if you said, Angela, you have to become a political science professor, right, or a hedge fund manager, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'd be terrible, because I'm not very good at forcing myself to do things for even 10 minutes that I really don't want to do.
Yeah. You all are raising some really interesting issues about the whole range, the different pathways to grit in life, the different ways that one can live the good life. I think personally about my own life story and how I obsessively focused on one goal and one goal only for 10 years. And in such a narrow, I'm going to redefine intelligence. I'm going to redefine intelligence. And I just tried to block everything else out of my life. And I think about the benefits and disadvantages of that for my well-being, my health. And I'm not like that anymore. I'm now more diffuse and like lots of different things and fascinated. But I think about that point in my life from high school to the end of college or grad school. And I just think about that time in my life and those choices I made where, if I may toot my own horn, I was considered I was in Angela's book as a paragon of grit. So I'm talking as a.
What happened then? Did you feel like you did it? And then, well,
not to toot my own horn.
Gritty. Well, what did you feel at some point that you had, climbed Mount Everest, that you had planted the flag? Did you feel like you had successfully redefined it? And then what happened? Tell me what happened next.
This is I've been doing a lot of reflection about my life here as I sit here during COVID and I can't leave my home. So I think about my life and the choices I've made and I think about how all I ever wanted to do and my dad's in this chat room somewhere, so he can attest to this. There was a period of time where I made an explicit goal. I'm going to redefine intelligence. That's all I want to do in my life. I don't imagine a life after doing that. And I would say that the point where I did that was 2013. The culmination of that was my book, Ungifted, Intelligence Redefined. It was my first major book for a general audience. And that allowed me to put a stamp on, look, it's in the subtitle, Intelligence Redefined. See, I did it. I redefined intelligence. But then I was like, wait, now what? And I did face a bit of a crisis around 2013 after that book was published, where I was like, I didn't imagine in my head that there would be a life after grit. For me personally, I didn't imagine that there would be a life after being so gritty for 10 years, like at the exclusion of everything else in my life. You know, I would just go to the library. I would live and breathe intelligence research. I would go to the library and just spend 8-9 hours a day reading all the books. You get the idea. That it did create a little bit of a crisis for me personally for a little while before I found another interest. But.
And then did you find, it sounds like you found other interests plural, right? Is that like you didn't latch on to like another 10-year interest and then singularly focus on that? Is that right?
Oh no, I would say just, I guess my kind of personality is that I'm promiscuously gritty. That's how I'll say it. Or serially, serial monogamy. That's what I'm trying to say.
Scott, can I ask a question just to interrupt, just for a nuance? This is one thing. So I've noticed this with writers. When writers write a book that, every book always feels like it's the book you were born to write because it's the culmination of things. But sort of always produces that feeling, right? But for early writers, they're not used to it. They don't know it. They've not had it before. So they're like, oh my God, I was born to do this thing. And that, which sounds like what your intelligence thing was.
That's
and
what
I've
it felt
noticed
like.
that it's a block. Like it ends up being a block to future work. Like you have to if you think you wrote the perfect book, you sort of have to get over yourself to get to the next one. The worst writer's block I ever had was after I wrote West of Jesus, which is the only time I actually thought I wrote a truly great book. Like all the other ones I could immediately poke holes at as soon as it was done. But that one I was sure was, the one, and I ended up with writer's block for the only time I've ever had in my life. After that, I noticed that with a lot of other people. Like when you're climbing that mountain, something about climbing that mountain when you actually it seems to block things and know something.
What was it like right afterwards? How did you feel right after you finished? Your masterpiece.
Let's just say I stayed very, very messed up for about a month. Life conveniently provided some very humbling experiences on the back end of that sort of got me back to a more inquisitive place. What I found is that it's sort of like being an expert puts you in a fixed mindset and tends to block. I couldn't get back to a growth mindset, right? So I couldn't open up and learn and re-tap into curiosity. That was my experience. I don't know if Scott's experience was different. That was sort of what I went through on that one.
I feel like I'm not as naive anymore. And it's and I mourn that in a sense. I mourn my innocence. Sorry if this is getting too existential, but there was I think about that Scott in those 10 years. I was pretty innocent in the sense that I had this idea that there would be a day where I would reach the goal, and then something heavens from above something would happen that didn't happen, or that was unrealistic to happen. And now I feel like I live life with more of a realistic understanding of, this is all going to be a process until I die. Until the day I die, this is actually one long process. But I feel like I'm not as innocent anymore in that sense. I don't know if any of you resonate with that at all.
That's interesting,
I think
Scott.
people are happiest when they're on the ascent. I think getting there, I mean, that may or may not, concord with your experience, but I'm happiest when I am making progress, not when I have made progress and I'm done. I know when Gary Becker, I think it's in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech for his prize in economics, and if not, it's in some autobiographical essay. I think he had said that after he finished writing a book, there would be a little depression, almost a kind of feeling of being lost, right? And I think people are happiest when they are pursuing goals that are meaningful to them, and you feel like you're really getting somewhere, right? That is when I'm happiest anyway.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.